I want to start off with a question that, well, sounds a little ridiculous on the surface. How do you turn a thought, something that has zero weight, no mass, no physical shape whatsoever, into cold, hard cash? Or just a physical reality?
It sounds like alchemy, honestly, like trying to spin straw into gold.
Right, exactly. But welcome to our deep dive today. I'm your host, and I'm very excited to get into this.
And I'm the expert joining you for this deep dive. And looking at the history of achievement, turning thoughts into reality isn't magic at all. It's actually a mechanical process.
And that is exactly what we are tackling today. We're pulling apart one of the most famous and I guess maybe most controversial books on success ever written, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, published way back in 1938.
Yeah, and I know what some of you listening are probably thinking, oh, great, the granddaddy of all self-help books.
It is easy to dismiss it as just that, but we really have to look at what this source material actually is. Hill didn't just, write a novel or sit in a cabin philosophizing about life. This is arguably the first major data-driven study of success.
Right, he spent 25 years interviewing over 500 of the most successful people in America. We're talking Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, people who built the modern world.
So it's less of a guru book and more of a qualitative research paper. He was looking for the code, the common denominator among all these titans.
And the book outlines 13 steps to riches based on that research. But today, per our mission for this deep dive, we aren't doing the broad overview. We are going deep into step 5.
Which is covered in chapter 6, imagination.
Yes, imagination.
Now, imagination is kind of a soft word. When I hear it, I immediately think of kids playing with cardboard boxes or maybe an artist in a studio. I definitely don't usually think of hard-nosed business strategy.
And that right there is exactly where most people get it wrong. Hill defines imagination very differently. He calls it the workshop of the mind.
The workshop, I like that phrasing. It implies sweat. It implies having tools. It implies that you're actually building something, not just daydreaming while staring out a window.
That's the critical distinction he makes. For Hill, imagination is the engine room. It is the specific place where desire, which he views as just a chemical impulse or energy in your brain, gets converted into action and eventually riches.
It's the bridge.
Exactly. Without the bridge, the desire just stays in your head and dies there.
Okay, let's unpack this workshop concept a bit more because Hill starts the chapter with a pretty massive claim. He says that man's only limitation, within reason, is the development and use of his imagination. That feels expansive.
It is expansive, but look at the context. He argues that we haven't even reached the apex of our development. We
Yeah.
discovered we have this facility, this imagination, but we're using it like a toddler uses a smartphone. We're just randomly swiping at the screen.
Right, not understanding the operating system at all.
Exactly. To understand the workshop, you have to understand the raw material. Hill says desire is a thought impulse. It's raw energy.
He does get a little cosmic here, doesn't he? He starts talking about how the Earth and the stars were formed from energy.
He does. And that's where some modern readers might roll their eyes and check out. But if you strip away the 1930s mystical language for a second, whether you look at it through physics or biology, he's kind of right. Everything tangible starts as intangible energy or atoms.
Nature organizes energy into matter.
Yes. And Hill is arguing that your brain does the exact same thing. When you have a burning desire for success, you are drafting the same stuff nature uses to create a planet. Imagination is just the mold you pour that energy into.
So we have this cosmic factory in our heads.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. Hill says for most of us, the factory is closed. The lights are totally off.
Quiescent is the word he uses, dormant. He compares it to a muscle.
Like if you broke your arm and had it in a cast for 6 months, what happens when the cast comes off?
The arm is still there, but it's withered. It's incredibly weak. The imagination works the exact same way. It doesn't die. But if you just work a routine job, think the exact same thoughts, and solve the exact same problems every single day, that muscle atrophies.
Which perfectly explains why so many people feel stuck. They literally don't have the mental muscle strength to imagine a way out of their current situation.
Right. But the good news is, like any muscle, it can be rehabilitated. You can go to the mental gym. But to do that, we need to understand the equipment inside the workshop. Hill divides imagination into 2 very distinct types.
And this is a huge clarification for me when reading this, because I think we often conflate being imaginative with being a genius inventor. We think you have to be Steve Jobs or Thomas Edison to have imagination.
But you don't. Hill breaks it down into synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Let's start with synthetic.
Synthetic imagination is what we use, 90% of the time? It's the faculty where you arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations.
Exactly. You aren't creating anything from scratch.
Yeah.
You are taking your experience, your education, your observations, basically all the Legos you've collected over your life, and you're building a new structure with them.
I find this incredibly relieving. It means I don't have to invent a brand new color to be successful. I just have to paint the wall a different way.
It completely democratizes success. You don't need to be a Nobel Prize winner. Hill notes that this is the form used by most successful business people. Take the smartphone, for instance.
Okay, yeah.
The camera existed, the phone existed, the internet existed, the touchscreen existed. The genius wasn't inventing the individual components. The genius was in the synthesis.
Combining them all into one device that fits in your pocket, that is synthetic imagination at its finest.
So that's the workhorse. But then he talks about creative imagination. And this is where the book veers back into that spiritual or woo-woo territory. He talks about infinite intelligence.
He really leans into it. And if you're a skeptic, you might totally check out here. But let's try to translate Hill's infinite intelligence into more modern terms. He's talking about those sudden moments of inspiration, the hunches, the clarity that just seems to come from nowhere.
The classic shower thoughts.
Exactly, but on steroids. Hill argues this faculty only functions when the conscious mind is vibrating at an exceedingly rapid rate.
Vibrating at a rapid rate. Again, that sounds like something you'd hear at a seance. What does that actually mean in a practical biological sense?
Well, think about when you are in a state of really high emotion. Fear, love, or in the context of this book, a burning desire. Your brain chemistry physically changes. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information, opens the floodgates.
You start seeing connections you would normally miss completely.
You become hypersensitive to patterns. Hill calls this tuning into vibrations, but a modern neuroscientist might just call it heightened pattern recognition driven by the subconscious.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So when he says we tune into ideas, it's not telepathy, it's that our internal receiver is finally switched on.
Yes, for the sake of this discussion, absolutely. But Hill is adamant about one thing. You cannot force creative imagination. It works automatically, but only when you've primed the pump with that intense, burning desire.
However, and this is a crucial takeaway for you listening, you don't need creative imagination to get rich.
That's the part I wanted to circle back to. We don't need to wait around for a lightning bolt of genius.
No, not at all. Most fortunes are built purely on synthetic imagination, taking what is already there and improving upon it. You don't need a divine revelation. You just need a better plan.
Speaking of plans and building fortunes, Hill pivots to some storytelling to really prove his point here. And he tells the origin story of Coca-Cola. But he tells it in a really interesting way, focusing entirely on the initial transaction.
The story of the drug clerk and the old doctor. It's a classic piece of American business legend. You have this old country doctor who wants to retire. He has a formula for a headache cure. He rides into town, goes into a drugstore, ties up his horse, and starts haggling with the young clerk, Asa Candler.
And they haggle for over an hour. Finally, the clerk buys the rights. He pays $500.
Which, we really have to pause and appreciate, was this staggering amount of money for a drugstore clerk in that era. That was his entire life savings. He was going all in.
So what did he actually buy? Like physically, what did he walk away with?
Physically, he bought an old copper kettle, a wooden paddle.
And a scrap of paper, right?
Yeah, a scrap of paper with the ingredients written on it.
That's it. A used pot and a recipe.
And here is Hill's major insight. The doctor had those physical things for years. He had the kettle, he had the formula, and he was broke. He was selling out for $500. The physical assets were effectively worthless on their own.
So if the assets were worthless, what on earth did the clerk pay all that money for?
He bought the potential. Hill says the mysterious ingredient the clerk added to that kettle wasn't sugar or coca leaves. It was imagination.
The doctor knew what the formula was chemically, just a local headache cure. But the clerk imagined what it could be, a refreshing beverage, a worldwide thirst killer.
That is a massive shift in perspective. One guy sees a minor medical tincture. The other guy sees a global consumer brand.
The clerk used his synthetic imagination. He didn't invent the soda itself. He invented the marketing. He invented the distribution model. He built a comprehensive plan around the formula. The gold wasn't inside the copper kettle. The gold was in the idea generated in his mental workshop.
It really highlights that ideas are the ultimate multiplier. You can have the best product in the world, the best kettle, But without the imagination to position it and sell it, it's just scrap metal.
And that leads perfectly into the second case study Hill provides, which I think is even more dramatic because it deals with the exact opposite problem, the dark side of the coin, which is indecision, the story of Dr. Frank Gonzalez and the $1 Million Sermon.
This one really hit home. I think anyone who has ever wanted to do something big but spent years just thinking about it is going to relate to this guy.
Gonzalez was a preacher in Chicago. He had a really noble ambition. He looked at the education system of his time and thought it was deeply flawed. He wanted to start a brand new college that focused on learning by doing practical skills. But he calculated he needed $1 million to even start it.
Which, again, in the late 1800s, is an astronomical sum of money.
Impossible money for a preacher. So what did he do? For 2 entire years, he thought. He wished. He drifted.
That's the painful part to read. He wasn't lazy. He was obsessed with the idea. He took the thought to bed with him. He woke up with it. But nothing actually happened.
Because he was just spinning his wheels in the mud of indecision. He hadn't turned the workshop on. He was basically just standing there admiring the tools. Then, one Saturday afternoon, he hits a breaking point. He's sitting in his room, probably frustrated out of his mind. And he finally asks himself, how long are you going to just think about this?
And he makes a decision. A snap decision right then and there.
He says, I will get this money within 1 week.
Okay, hold on. Let's look at that. He spends 2 years making zero progress. Then suddenly he thinks he can do it in a single week. That sounds delusional. What actually changed?
The time frame changed. And because of that, the pressure changed. Hill argues that the exact moment he set a definite deadline, a strange assurance came over him. He stopped wondering if he could do it and started planning how he was going to do it. His imagination kicked into high gear because he finally gave it a specific command.
So he takes a huge risk. He calls the local newspapers.
He tells them, I'm preaching a sermon tomorrow morning titled, What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million. He completely puts his reputation on the line. He burned his bridges.
He gets up to the pulpit the next morning. And this wasn't just a normal sleepy Sunday service.
No. He says he preached with a burning desire. He poured his absolute soul into it, describing exactly how he would build this new school. He wasn't just reading a script, he was channeling that creative imagination we talked about earlier.
And then the movie moment happens. He finishes, collapses into his chair, exhausted, and a man in the front row stands up.
Philip D. Armour, the massively wealthy meatpacking tycoon. He walks right up to the pulpit and says, Young man, I liked your sermon. Come to my office tomorrow morning and I'll give you the $1 million.
Just like that. 2 years of silent struggle, followed by 36 hours of actual execution, and the problem is completely solved.
Hill asks the obvious question here. Why didn't he get the money sooner? The money was always there. Armour was in the city. The idea was already in his head.
It was the decision.
It was the transition from wishing to demanding. Hill writes a line here that is just incredible. Success requires no explanations. Failure permits no alibis. The moment Gonzalez stopped making alibis for why he couldn't do it, his imagination provided the direct path.
Failure permits no alibis. It is brutal, but necessary to hear. So we've got the theory, we've got the historical examples, but I want to make this highly practical for you listening right now, because maybe you're listening to this on your commute and you have an idea. Maybe it's a business, a book, a career change, but your workshop is dusty. How do you actually start the machinery?
Hill does give us a roadmap, but you actually have to connect the dots between Chapter 6 and a few other chapters to see the whole picture. The very first step is deceptively simple. Write it down.
Why is the physical act of writing so important to this process?
Because it's the first step of transmutation. You are taking the intangible thought and turning it into a physical reality. Ink on paper. Until it is written down, it's just smoke. Once it's written, it becomes a plan.
Okay, step 1. Write the plan. But what if my plan, or what if it sucks? Or what if I just don't know how to execute it?
That is where you have to bring in the concept of the mastermind from Chapter 10. This is the ultimate hack for synthetic imagination.
We've touched on masterminds before, but in this specific context, it's essentially about distributed computing, right?
That's a perfect metaphor. Hill says no individual has enough experience, education, or native ability to ensure great fortune all alone. If your imagination is stuck, you plug it into someone else's.
So it's not just asking a friend for casual advice. It's saying, here is my synthetic idea. I've built it this far with my Legos. Now, use your Legos to fill in the structural holes.
Exactly. You are literally borrowing their imagination. You're linking your mental batteries together. A true mastermind isn't a social club. It's a highly focused problem-solving unit. When you bounce an idea off a group of people who are in harmony with your goal, the resulting energy is greater than the sum of the parts. It sparks that creative imagination.
Okay, so we write it down, we get a mastermind group to stress test it. But then comes the hard part, the actual execution. And Hill has a stark warning here about persistence.
This comes from Chapter 9, but it's vital for keeping the imagination alive. Hill says most people kill their imagination entirely because of one single failure. They make a plan, they try it, it fails, and they say, well, I guess I'm just not meant to be successful.
They blame their desire, not the plan itself.
Right. And Hill says that is the fatal error. Temporary defeat is just a signal that the plan was unsound. It is not a signal to give up on the vision. If the plan fails, you go right back to the workshop. You use your imagination to synthesize a brand new plan. You keep the destination, you just change the vehicle.
But there are enemies at the gate trying to stop you. Hill lists a whole bunch of alibis or excuses we constantly use. What would you say is the biggest enemy of imagination?
There are two obvious ones, indecision and procrastination. But the most insidious one, the one that silently kills ideas in the crib, is the fear of criticism.
What will my mother think? What are the neighbors going to say?
It sounds trivial, but Hill notes that countless brilliant ideas never leave the mind because the creator imagines the ridicule of relatives or friends. We preemptively kill the idea just to save our ego.
Which is exactly why the mastermind is so critical. You need a safe space to incubate these weird, fragile ideas before you expose them to the harshness of the real world.
Precisely. You need a greenhouse before you plant the tree out in the wild. Hill actually suggests a regular self-audit. He includes a questionnaire in the book. You have to look in the mirror and ask tough questions. Have I delivered service of the best possible quality? Have I been truly persistent? Am I manufacturing success, or am I manufacturing alibis?
It brings up the whole concept of luck, too. I mean, looking back at the preacher story, he stood up, gave a speech, and a millionaire just happened to be sitting there. A cynic would immediately say, well, he just got lucky.
Hill would vehemently disagree with that. He argues that the only break anyone can ever rely on is a self-made break.
But the millionaire was there. That is luck.
Was it? Or did the preacher create the exact environment for luck to strike? If he hadn't boldly announced the sermon to the papers, if he hadn't put that intense pressure on himself, if he hadn't spoken with that burning conviction, Armour might have sat there all morning and never written the check. The break was the direct result of the action.
So you can't just sit around waiting for your turn. You have to actively use your imagination to engineer the scenario where luck can actually find you.
That is the core message here. Ideas are the products of the imagination. Hill says ideas can be transmuted into cash, and there is no fixed price for sound ideas. Knowledge is cheap. Today, you can Google absolutely anything. But the idea, the unique way you connect that knowledge, that is where the monopoly lies.
So, bringing this all home for you listening, we all have this workshop. For some of us, the machinery is pretty rusty. For others, maybe we're turning out the wrong stuff entirely.
I would say start by just respecting your own ideas more. Hill says ideas are intangible forces, but they have more power than the physical brains that give birth to them. When you get a hunch, don't brush it off.
Treat it like an important guest. Invite it in. Write it down immediately.
Write it down. That is the ignition switch. And remember, you are using the exact same equipment that built the Ford Motor Company. You have the exact same biological hardware as Elon Musk or Oprah. The difference isn't the hardware, it's the software. It's whether you are running the program of alibis or the program of definite plans.
That's a very powerful place to leave it.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over on your own. Hill tells us that thoughts are things. You are the foreman of a massive factory inside your head. That factory is running 24/7. Your subconscious never clocks out. So look at your life right now. Look at your bank account, your career, your relationships. That is your inventory. That is what your factory has produced so far.
And if you don't like the inventory, stop yelling at the warehouse guys. You have to go back to the workshop, the imagination, and fundamentally change the design.
Are you manufacturing success? Or are you manufacturing alibis? Stop wishing, stop drifting, and start manufacturing your plan today. Thank you so much for doing this deep dive with us.
We will see you on the next one.